Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low Magazine? Because 4Low Magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Jason Conover. Jason is one of the Pacific Northwest Washington Wheelers, early competitor in the ARCA series, along with a pirate bulletin board member going by the name of Snort Clown, and one of the founders, if not the founder, of S&N Fab. Any of the Wheelers that have been around for a long time will remember S&N Fab, absolutely. And Jason, thank you for coming on board this early morning and talking with us before you head off to work.
Thanks, Rich.
So it was great seeing you this weekend. You competed up here in Goldendale for our Western Nationals. But before we get into talking about this weekend, let's go and talk about your early days. I understand that you grew up in the Seattle Basin area, but possibly on an island. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was on, most of my years were on Camano Island.
Okay.
Out of Stanwood, Washington. So it's about an hour north of Seattle.
Okay. So what was that like? Is it a small rural community? I've not been out that way. Or is it?
It is. Stanwood is the town that leads to the island. The island is almost more of a peninsula. It's more or less separated by a slough and a small stream that bisects it. So, but it only has, one way on and one way off. And there was probably about 5,000 to 6,000 people on it at that time. And it's relatively small. It's 14 miles long and 7 miles wide. So it's not a huge island, but it's fair size, but by no means completely isolated from anything. But there's no town on the island.
So growing up, then, that you had lived in a wooded area, and I would imagine there was a lot of open space, or even if it was privately owned, you probably had the opportunity to get out into the woods.
Well,
No?
not necessarily.
Okay.
No, I was originally we'd moved up here. I lived in Colorado, and we'd moved to Oregon for a couple of years, and then come to Washington. And so from about third grade on is where I was on Camano Island.
Okay.
The Stanwood area.
Okay, so Colorado to Oregon, then to Washington.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, originally born in Washington, but yeah, then moved to Colorado for a number of years. There was work. My dad was a Vietnam vet, and once he got out, there wasn't a lot of work here in Washington, and so once the opportunity opened up, he came back to Washington to work at Boeing.
Excellent. Okay. So what was life like growing up on the island?
Like I said, it's a small Stanwood. It was a small community. I think my graduating class was less than 100 people. So, everybody from Camano Island went to Stanwood schools. Which is the town that you go through that leads, onto the island. So, small community. The island was big enough. There's a dairy farm there where grew up working quite a bit, and there's a cannery in town that I worked at as well as a younger kid. So, but I'd lived in Stanwood for a couple of years, and then we'd lived on a farm that was out there on the island for a few years, and then to the top of the island, which was more in the wooded area. So
And
yeah,
when you were going to
little bit of
school,
variation.
were you studious, or were you?
Um, I didn't really uh, I didn't dislike school, but I didn't it wasn't my favorite thing. I grew up racing a lot of motocross, and so for a large number of years that was my vice. So I spent most of my time just trying to get done with school so I could either when I got off school I would either go and work for a while, and then a lot of times I would practice and ride. So that was, and so as far as like interactions with people at school and stuff like that, I was not into any of the social networks or anything like that. It was to get away from that and go racing. So
Okay, so you
yeah.
did your own thing.
I absolutely, yeah.
So was high school it, or did you do any college time at all? Community college or anything like that?
I did directly out of high school. In high school, I for the classes that I had, I excelled really well in metal shop, of course, and in my drafting class. And both of those teachers wanted me to go into that field, or into those specific fields, I should say. And then eventually, I kind of ended up in both, so it worked out, I guess, in my favor. But once I got done with that, I went to Skagit Valley College, and I was going after a liberal arts degree initially, and then prerequisites for University of Oregon. I was after a commercial pilot's license in a degree in engineering, which I didn't pursue, but while I was in college, I did take welding courses. So, and then just spent some time there doing some welding, which eventually led to me taking a summer and going and working for a ship in Alaska as a ship's welder.
Oh, okay.
So
And what size ships were you working on in Alaska? Were they the
it
fishing?
was a 400-foot boat. Yeah.
Wow, it's a good
Yeah.
sized boat.
Yes.
So then, what was the boat's purpose?
It was a floating processor
Oh, okay.
cannery. Yeah.
And s-
So I'd had some work also in Stanwood, or previous working for what's called Twin City Foods, where they um, did peas and corn and some various other things. And so in there, they have people that operate the machinery, and people that lead and things like that. And so since I had some experience in that, and then on top of that, once they figured out I could weld, it was pretty easy to move into the engineering department on the boat to do that for a little while. So, and the whole idea behind that was to save money, of course, for college.
okay. And is that what you did?
I saved money for college, and then I came home and lived like a king for a little while.
I know a lot of people that went to Alaska, like when in my years in high school, right after or during, they were working on the pipeline. And
Yeah,
so many of those guys went up there and came back with about as much money as they left with, even
yeah,
though they were making huge dollars up there. Every time they would come back for, you know, a week or two, it'd be just total party time. And then they'd go
yeah,
back up there and they'd talk about, having to buy a hamburger, at McDonald's for $6 or $7 or something like that.
yeah.
And then spending all their time in the bars and everything. And it was like, I don't think I ever want to do that man camp thing. But I guess on a ship, it might be a little different.
Absolutely. Your room and board was paid for. The pay wasn't really high. I'm gonna guess like $6 to $10 an hour. However, it was 12 on, 12 off, 7 days a week. So, and nowhere to spend your money. So everything just went home. And so there's really no bills. So for me, it was great. I didn't have any debt. I had a lot of money saved up, and I put in a lot of extra hours. You could work more than 12 if you so chose. So a lot of times I did because there's really not a lot to do on that boat. So and at that time, the VHS tape was key, and there was a very limited number of movie choices, and it was nothing new. So yeah, I spent a lot of time just working and biding my time until I came home. But yeah, so but it worked out good. But fortunately, once I got home, even though I could have went to school, an opportunity arose for me to work in my way into an engineering company, and so that turned into that, and that's the direction I ended up in.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit then. After you got back and you were working for the engineering company,
hmm
were you still riding motorcycles?
So I had stopped racing for a period of time. Uh, my final season, I was an intermediate, probably a mid pack. I would have liked to have turned pro within a year or so. Um, and I had to get an ACL reconstruction, and
Ah,
so I did that. I tried to make a comeback, but I had lost the edge, a little bit of fear of getting hurt, and so I kind of took a break from riding,
okay.
um, pretty heavily. So at that point, I didn't really have an outlet, and that's during the end of my racing career. I bought a Toyota pickup, um, four wheel, like literally, an '84 Toyota pickup. It's almost like the truck from Back to the Future. I mean, it was mint condition and got a great deal on it. The guy had never off-roaded it. I don't even think he drove it in the rain. Um, but I took care of that for him. So and then so that was my primary means of transportation. But that's when the four-wheeling bug kind of caught in, um, and started doing that, and that's what kind of took up some of that motocross vice, in that just something that was fun and to do and challenging, depending on where you went and stuff like that. So
So,
yeah,
what age were you with the when you got the Toyota?
I want to say I was 19, or I think I was 19 or 20
And
when
that
we were
was
riding.
after the time on the boat?
No, prior. I'm
Prior.
sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
that was prior to the boat. Yeah,
Okay. And then when you came back from working in Alaska on the boat, you still had the Toyota?
absolutely. Yeah. In
Okay.
fact, after that, that was all cut up for years, that I four wheeled, that I turned into the buggy, or a buggy, and yeah, I that that thing had a lot of stories it could tell.
So then you came back, you went to work for the engineering firm, and what
Yep.
were your duties there at the engineering firm?
I started really at the bottom. It was an opportunity that was a foot in the door, and it was either that or college, and it was literally doing blueprints, standing in front of a machine and feeding a regular drawing into a blueprint machine, and then pulling the two separated out of the other side and stacking them and stapling them. And then in the after hours, because there was overtime available, I was allowed to uh, do the CAD drafting side, and learn that, um, and start working that direction. And so that's what I would do, is any opportunity I had when I was, after my 8 hours of standing at that machine or delivering drawings, I would work in AutoCAD. So, and this is probably what, 91, 92.
Okay.
So quite a few years back. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
and that was being in Washington as well, correct?
That was, yes. I worked in downtown Seattle, commuted there every day. So roughly about a 50-minute commute. Yeah. For a
Okay.
large number of years. Yeah.
And then from the engineering firm, or you were still at the engineering firm, and then after in the after hours you got to do the CAD drawings. Did that
Yep.
did that job progress to where you got off of the machines doing the blueprints?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it got to the point to where I had worked my way to pretty much this, one of the faster drafters, and working with engineers and understanding drawings a lot better, to where I was just a full-time, as they called it there then, a draftsman. It's a far cry from that, but the more you understood systems rather than just lines on paper, the better you would excel, because you could interpret what the engineer was trying to convey in their red lines or their markups. And sometimes you could anticipate some other changes that might need to happen. So as you did that more and more, you would understand that, and eventually it moves you up. So
Okay.
to the point to where, there's a point when at the end of my career there, which was 8 or 9 years, I was the manager of the department. So yeah, it eventually worked its way up.
Excellent. So let's talk about, okay, you're there for 8 or 9 years. At
Hmm.
that time, you take your Toyota and you start hacking on it.
Yeah, absolutely. The Toyota started out, during that time, like I said, it was nice, but it had, I think the first thing I put on it was this long set of shackles in the back, and it already had a lift when I got it, and a 31-inch tire, but it wasn't very long till I went to a 33-inch tire, and then eventually, I had, put differential lockers in it. I think I ran an air locker in the front and a Detroit in the rear, and like a 571 gear, which is a horrible ratio. They tend to burn up, but put those in it, and a winch, and then just, four-wheeled it. A lot of mud. There wasn't really a lot of rock up here. It's a little bit different. In Washington, we don't have a lot of really rocky terrain.
Especially on the
More like,
west side.
yeah, it's more like, Geico always called it tree dodging, or moshing. You kind of just drive in between trees and through trails in the woods. So, and then eventually, it just leads to a bigger tire. Then it's a 33, and then comes the Burfield breakages that, it's kind of a cycle that you go through with these vehicles. You upgrade the things as you can go and as money permits, and I'm going to get this and I'm going to upgrade that, and that's kind of where it was at, and then it really started to take the downhill spiral as things progressed. I want to say mid 90s. It started, you know, linked suspension, in the rear, and things like that. So yeah, that began that, and that was the hobby after hours at work.
Okay.
So that's all that turned into.
And that hobby turned into eventually S&N Fab. Is that correct?
It did. There was an opportunity. So towards the end of my job at that engineering firm, I was spending a lot of time. I was spent a lot of time thinking about different four-wheel drive ideas and components, and I by this time my truck had been cut apart and was anything but a truck. It was more of a tube car, and was bending a lot of tube, and just a lot of stuff, and just starting to do chassis. I think might have been 98, 99 probably by this time. And Trevor and I were working together. He was a few years younger than me, lived down the road from an ex-fiance and I, but once we met, we got along really, really well. And so we spent a lot of time after hours working on stuff, bending tube and fabricating and just, wrenching. And so that was kind of, yeah, the beginning of that. And so spending a lot of time, well, as at the end of that, I was managing and maintaining electronically all of the buildings in the world for Microsoft on the electrical side. So as they would, that was when they were in their hiatus, they would make adjustments to offices and rewire them and reorganize them, which didn't require an engineer's stamp. So we could do a quick, easy layout on that, and then they would rewire it, and then we would keep those drawings up to date. And that project was coming to an end because it was going to go underneath one roof. And so at that point, my company had brought in someone that kind of took over that ran one of the biggest engineering firms in the West Coast into the ground. And so I took that opportunity to basically, it was, I want to say I was 29. And I thought, well, right now is a point in my life to where I don't have another job. And at that point, I'd moved myself up to a position to where it was harder to find another position that was open like that. And then 9/11 hit, and that's when it really made it hard for me to find another job. But at that point, that's when I started just doing the full time fabrication work, and then assisting Trevor. Trevor had a flooring business, and so I would help him do flooring and during the days, and we would work on rigs in the evenings. So
Okay,
yeah,
so I need to know how the name S&N Fab came up and what that stands for, because it's Jason Conover and Trevor
yeah,
Johnston, but it's
yep,
S&N Fab.
yeah. So it's almost kind of like a gamer tag, and a little bit of a joke, and maybe nicknames and stuff like that. And so um, that those were our aliases just online. People didn't usually go by their full name on um, uh, the internet and on Pirate, and we had our own board, the Snort board, which was our four-wheel drive club. And so those were based off of that, and so it was really just a joke in the first Vantage, I think, competition. We had some stickers and just did them as S&N Fab, um, to represent some of the work we were doing. And later on, once the business kind of started up, we were going to change it, but that was everybody, said, no, this is kind of already what you're known as, and so it, it
So,
just stuck. We just left it.
so, so the S is for Snort
Snort
Clown.
Clown, and N is for Nexter. Yeah,
Okay, all right. That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure.
I mean, mine's pretty self-explanatory. The Nexter comes from it's kind of a joke, because some people, when someone hates their nickname, that's when it really sticks. And a funny story with this is Trevor. Uh, this was during the Jerky Boys, and there was an ass neck and a silly neck, and I don't know if many people have ever listened to them, but they say some pretty funny stuff. And so when we would call each other, it was always left as "Hey, ass neck," and and stuff like that. And then a friend had a hatched a baby duckling, and the first thing they saw was its neck, and so he named it Neck. And then so one day Trevor was referred to as Neck, and Trevor's like, I don't mind ass and I don't mind ass neck, or but he goes, I really hate neck, and it's like, okay, there you are, Neck. And so and then it just turned into Nexter, and that's and it stuck. So and then once you start using it online, that's what you're kind of known as. So
Right. Awesome. So what I remember, you guys put together a pretty unique chassis design,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't think that it changed all that much over the years. At least the visual of it. Is that correct?
That is correct. So yeah, that was a Bravo series. So it'd been a long road to get there. um, figuring out what and how you want to lay out a car and not look like everybody else's car. There wasn't as many builders as there are now, so
True.
you had a little bit more freedom without, feeling like you're maybe copying someone or stealing an idea. And that was part of the fun back then, is you could innovate, and um, you really had to make stuff out of junk in a lot of cases. But the chassis design, I spent a lot of time looking at a lot of different types of desert cars, and looked at other people's chassis, and I watched, how tubes bent and how things reacted. And there's a lot of inspiration that I got from people back in the day. Eric Vilar, I think he worked for Avalanche, and I think he was a help with a sniper, and things that I saw that he had done in the day, and some of the tube work he did, and really, liked the design and the uniqueness. And and of course, Shannon Campbell or Twisted Customs or any of those guys, and really liked what they were doing. And tried to come up with my own design. But I approached it differently, just because I felt, I looked at the car more as kind of like a bridge to hold the suspension up, and then to save the occupants. So I looked at like where things would be impacted and how it would transfer energy, and where it would push. So like if I hit it here, what's going to happen, and where's that energy going to go? I didn't have SolidWorks, and I just sketched it out on a pad. And then I did a skid plate in the middle that's always made out of 1/4 inch plate, which is a little bit different than everybody else does. That's not really a design that anybody else uses. But um, my idea with that was, you're really probably not going to tear suspension links out of 1/4 inch plates.
Right.
So, um, and what that did was that gave a foundation of where all your push pull points were. Now, keep in mind, this is at a time where some of the suspension theories and ideas were being tested, and there were some pluses and there were some minuses and there were some quirks. But kind of understanding some of that from making a lot of mistakes, and you always make mistakes. It's a give and take for any design that you do. But came up with a foundation and a plan that I wanted to do. And we had done a couple of complete chassis uh, for other people, but they weren't of a specific design. But I ended up building for myself, the first Bravo. That was never intended to be a mass produced thing. I built the car for me. I built what I wanted for myself, 100%. And it really, by accident, turned into, you know, I don't know, probably 70 or 80 chassis, I would guess, somewhere in there, probably.
Oh, wow.
At least.
And
So
when did you first compete, and was it in that Bravo chassis?
it wasn't. So the year prior, well, I mean, I'd been competing in like the Northwest Rock Crawling Championships, and I did that in the old Toyota buggy. As it was cut up the first year I did it, and it still had a windshield in it, but was, you know, kind of a lot of tube work in a bed. And then I decided that if I rolled, I didn't want a face full of glass. So the next year it didn't have a front clip on it anymore. So, that just kept getting cut up more and more. And then like I said, we did a couple of chassis, one for Mike Dixon. He had a layout he wanted to do. And so we built that, which was a Gecko. And then we did the car for Jay Standish.
Okay.
And Jay had some specifics, and that he was after, but left the design open. And so that car had features of like a Campbell chassis, some inspiration maybe from Mike Schaefer. And that's when, building that car, I came up with more along the lines of what I wanted to do for myself. And that was a Toyota based buggy too, his was. So I knew I wanted to use my, high pinion 60s. I wanted to use a 4.3 V6 and, turbo 400 to my Atlas. And that was, those were my drivetrain components that I was specifically after. So,
Okay.
and get away from the Toyota stuff.
And then you jumped into the ARCA series, is that correct?
I did. Yeah. I spotted well, I'd gone to the Lake Almador with you guys in Cal
Right.
Rocks. And then, after that, we started getting a little bit more into the building. And then, um, yeah, after that, Jay Standish did the ARCA series. And uh, partway through that season, he'd asked if his spotter couldn't make it. And so I filled in for him. And I think I ended up spotting for him at the Donner Ski Ranch, also one of your other events.
Right.
And then after that, the next year, I spotted for him the whole season for ARCA, and then the year after that was the season I competed in ARCA,
Okay.
and then did that for a season. And right after that's when the UROC and ARCAs those kind of died down, and that's when you know the 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 We Rock series kicked up, and started. And I think it was the Boulevard Brawl.
Yeah,
Were
I'm
you
not
guys
sure.
making?
I don't remember which one was the
It,
first
well, it wasn't the
actual We
first We
Rock.
Rock, but yeah, but it was when your season was, because of what was going on with U Rock and Arca.
Right.
Um, there was too much what ifs going on with that, and I think yours was the only one that was solidified. So, and that season, yeah, that's the one where Trevor and I was waiting on Dynatrack axles and parts for them, and I wasn't able to get my car done in time, so we took Trevor's down, and that's why we had two cars. We had him drive. So, yeah,
Okay. Boulevard, that was kind of a crazy event. The
yeah,
It was only used the one time. The
hmm,
the It was right there. The property was on the border with
yeah,
Mexico,
yeah.
and we had a lot of south of the border spectators come through, at least at the food booth. I don't know if they stayed around and watched the competition much, but you
Yeah,
could tell who they were because they were all carrying like old gallon milk jugs full of water
yeah,
and
yeah,
standing in the food line to get hamburgers and hot dogs.
yeah.
And Border Patrol was going crazy.
Yes, yes.
Oh, man.
That was a good event though. It was a lot of fun and really great terrain too.
Yeah, it was. It was. I wished we could have used that area again, but
Yeah,
it just wasn't going to work out with the property owner and the
yeah,
demands that he wanted to make that work. But
yeah,
that's life, that happens a
yeah,
lot.
yeah.
So how long did you guys run S&N Fab? Is in it in together, and is it still a thing?
So we ran S&N Fab till pretty much the end of 2009. Um, and uh, there was just a point to where, um, we never really had any debt. We didn't buy any new vehicles. We just kind of made a living with it. And we worked, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. We worked very hard. Found that we couldn't get away a lot. And that's what you had to do to just make it work. Um, and keep the doors open. And it had run its course with me. At that time, I was dealing with some health issues. I wasn't feeling really well, and we flat out couldn't afford health insurance. And I was like, I'm done. I need to get a job, and I always had the fallback of the engineering side. And all during that time, I'd been called, several times, asked to come back to the engineering side from different firms, and where a lot of people had migrated to when the previous place I was at had closed down. um, Asking me to come back or to come back into that field. And so it was nice to always have a secondary fallback. And working for yourself is a hard living. You can certainly attest to that. It's you are dedicated to that, and I wanted a little bit more. I missed some of my other hobbies, and then, like I said, not feeling well and not being able to figure out what was wrong. Um, I felt, well, it was a good choice for me, and by that time, Trevor and I each had significant others. I'd had, family. I needed to make sure that that was taken care of, number one. And like I said, when the opportunity arose, I gave him the thumbs up that I would come back, and I talked to Trevor about it, and he was pretty good with it because I think he was tired of the run as well. So we decided to let everybody know that we were going to close our doors in a few months, and then we had a really crazy run on chassis.
Because
So
everybody wanted one.
yeah, they'd always say, "Yeah, I'm going to get a chassis eventually, and then I'll put it together later." And I was pretty burned out. I mean, I lived four-wheel drive. I mean, I always had my cell phone on, and a lot of times when we would sell chassis to people, we used to have a lot of pictures on the web of how we'd assemble. So people, when they put the cars together, they could figure out how did they do the brake pedals? How did they set the engine in there? Because they were pretty open inside the cars. I mean, the suspension was the key layout, but they'd given them approximate where they want the harmonic balancer, where they'd want the engine, and how to do the transmission. And you could see a lot of that online. And so, but I was always available and would talk to people till late at night. In fact, Lori would threaten to put a timer on my phone and a credit card, before people would call, so that they would charge them. So, because I'd spend so much time on the phone, and so by that time I was just, yeah, like I said, very, very burned out, and so yeah, we decided, it wasn't too long after '09, and we kind of moved away from the rock crawling side and did the King of the Hammers thing, and found that I liked that. But like I said, yeah, it was time to move on to get some health insurance. So
So you
that's
went
when
back into engineering.
I did. Yep, yep. And by that time, the 3D side had really blossomed. And at the end of my old previous career, I was one of the few that was doing 3D stuff, in the early and or mid, 90s and early 2000s. So it wasn't really that well known, and so it was a little bit easier for me to plug and play, coming back into it later. So
Excellent.
yeah,
And
it's a
is
good
that what
opportunity.
you're still doing today?
It is. Yep. Yep. I ended up, well, I'm not really with an engineering firm. I've moved to the other side of the fence, which I like a lot better. I stayed. I generally don't like to move jobs. I try to stay for a minimum of 5 years,
Okay.
to give them an opportunity to recoup money for their investment in me. So, and it's just, I've never really thought it looks good on a resume to move around a lot, but I stayed at a company called Wood Harbinger for about 6 years. And then an opportunity opened up to move to a general contractor that was looking for what's called a BIM manager. So the stuff I do is like, they refer to it as BIM, but it's building information modeling. And it's running the 3D side, but I was more on the technical side and knowing the software and able to manipulate files. And as you draw a building in 3D, you have all the systems, and you have all the plumbing, the piping, and all of these things. And I had been boots on the ground in that. And on top of that, I knew how to run the clash side and to do other things. So and just being able to draw some really odd stuff as needed. So for a general contractor, that brought a lot of value because I could come in there and I could oversee the other trades and make sure that their stuff is playing nice together, that ductwork isn't blowing through, or that we don't have fire protection blowing through all the ductwork, and that the pipes fit and stuff, because a lot of stuff that goes into buildings these days is prefabricated outside and then has to go in and be installed. They don't just have a plumber go in with a big stack of pipe and fittings and just, start cutting and making it work, roughly following where the drawings are. So um, that worked really, really good. And it was a lot of fun. It was neat to see that side of it, placing tower cranes and doing haul routes and site logistics plans on figuring out how you're going to feed a project and things like that. So it was a different avenue. So definitely a change, but certainly a lot of fun.
So then you're still wheeling, but you're working in the engineering field, in
No, well,
construction.
so yeah, before that, I guess when I was at Wood Harbinger, I raced. Uh, I raced with Dave Schneider. So Dave Schneider's car had burned to the ground that we built him in '09.
Right.
And so he was running first in the Best in the Desert series. And of course, when his car burns to the ground, out playing, of course, um, he was pretty upset. And I'd raced my car in just King of the Hammers, and I didn't have the means, especially with a new job or the time, to go and race a bunch of the series and doing a bunch of Ultra 4. And so at that point, I told Dave, I said, why don't you take my car? It's just sitting in my garage, and use it for the time being until you figure out what you're going to do. And reluctantly, he was cautious about it because, he already didn't have one car, and what happened if he burned down another one. But I wasn't worried about that. I was like, it is what it is. That's the inherent risk you take with this. And so he took that and was able to continue to race. And so he did that for a couple of years, but it allowed me to daisy chain with him and be a part of that. So, we were able to race Vegas to Reno and finish that, which is a bucket list item for me, of course,
Right.
and allowed me to team up with him and drive and race. So it was a great opportunity to do something like that, and a lot of fun. And then that was 2010. In early 2010, I missed King of the Hammers because it figured out that my sickness and what I was dealing with is I had a dead gallbladder, and it was dragging my system down and making me
Oh,
feel crappy.
okay.
That's all it was. And it was actually a relatively simple surgery, and they took it out, and I felt 1,000% better. So it was certainly nice to get that out of the way. So it wasn't anything that was going to kill me, but boy, I sure felt terrible. Um, and then yeah, and then 2011, um, we did the King of the Hammers, and then at that point, I brought the car home for a summer. I didn't end up four wheeling it at all. Dave came and got it again, and then raced it up until 2014 while they were developing the top shelf. And then at that point, I'd been away from it for a couple of years. And just really nobody calling or questions or anything like that. It was a nice break. And I started enjoying things like, I got into action, uh, three-gun shooting, um, just a lot of hobbies that I'd had before, building computers, just different things that I was into prior to S&N Fab that I couldn't do back then, RC cars, crap like that. So it was nice to have other hobbies than that. I told Dave, just sell the thing off. And so that's where I went carless for a few years.
So you said something that piqued my interest. You said the three-gun shooting, and
Yes.
that's pistol, rifle, and shotgun.
Yep. Yep. It was just action pistol at first, and then I
Okay.
got a little bit into the three gun, and that was a lot of fun. I didn't like to reload, so it made it a little bit more expensive. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was at the end of the day, the cardboard doesn't shoot back, so it's still just a game. Um, so there's not a lot of practicality other than shooting under duress that you learn with it, but it certainly was a lot of fun. Yeah, it did. I got into building my own guns and stuff like that. I mean, it's just kind of how I've always been. Everything that I do, I kind of, like to figure it out and build it myself and see if I can maybe, maybe not building an AR and improve on it, but knowing how it works and functions and how to tune it and make it work properly so it'll shoot any ammo and things like that is a lot of fun. So yeah. But yeah, I did that for I want to say 2 or 3 years. I got into that pretty heavily. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Cool. That's a different. You don't hear people talk about that a lot, so that piqued my
No,
interest.
yeah, yeah.
So then you
I
go
have a,
carless for a while,
yeah,
and then you have the buggy that you have now that you competed in.
yeah. So what happened is I took this long break, and then Nathan Osborne and Steve Reynolds, both of them were action shooting with me
Oh, okay.
as well. Nate had maintained his car. Nate lives 2 miles from me. Steve doesn't lived up in North Bend at the time, but he still had his old buggy. But yeah, we spent a lot of time shooting, and then Nate and his wife, my wife and I, we started traveling with them to Hawaii, and really enjoyed it there, and that type of eating barbecue and just sipping mai tais. It was really kind of fun, another hobby, one that my doing really liked.
Right.
So anyway, doing that, and while we were there, Nate was always playing and goofing off with the RC crawlers, and he's like, dude, I bought a bomber, and he goes, man, that thing is so cool, and I, he goes, you need to go and get one, and I was like, dude, I build cars and I race against Randy Sloss, and why am I gonna buy his RC car and do that? And Nate's like, well, I understand, but came back and I bought a bomber. I probably would have been happier with a real one, but the RC was pretty legit. So we got those, and then of course the mods start, and then we're jumping them off jumps that are big enough for bicycle crap like that. It's just that downhill spiral. And then by chance we decided to go to and I started modifying them a little bit and kind of started building my own, and then we ended up going to an RC comp, and that's where the bug came back in. And then so I got into that, and then I'd called Lariat Trail Ready, and I had a piece of 7075 aluminum plate, and I made a frame rail set that would fit within the class parameters and still fit the criteria, but was custom made, and used a lot of the stuff that I used on my regular buggies onto these RCs, and maybe it didn't work as good as some of the other stuff, but it was the realism of it that drew me back. And then so I started making replicas of all my old cars, and then I started collecting a few parts. Nate was on me about getting a buggy back, and I was like, yeah, maybe. And so I had a few parts laying around, and so I talked to Dave Schneider, and the car of his that had burned to the ground had been sitting in two halves, or I think it was tacked back together, laying in the backyard of one of his friend's cars. And I built that car for him in late 2008, early 2009, that he raced in King of the Hammers '09. But when he did the Best in the Desert series, they actually cut the car at the A pillar and they cut the rear half off. So that part was still the original piece that I had built for him. He had done some modifications to the skid plate area, but the whole top of the car had sagged from the fire. So I told him, I said, well, let me get that back from you, and I'll just restore it to its original form and play with it a little bit. And so I ended up with a similar shock package, and I thought, oh, it'd be fun to put it together and have something that's versatile. It can go fast and bounce around a little bit, and no intent of racing, and it would never pass KOH Tech because it's my cars were all usually inch and a half tubing,
Right.
and they'd replace the top of that thing. I think they did an inch and three-quarter. That's why it had been cut apart. And so I put all that stuff back together, and got a good deal on a motor with 320 20,000 mile, LS motor that smoked, but it ran, and then called in on a lot of my favors that I'd never called in on before, machine work, any of the old companies that I'd worked with, Vic at Advanced, he hooked me up great, and and of course Trail Ready and Randy's Ring Opinion and stuff like that, and was able to put together a car to go out and play with, and then went out and played a few times, and after I'd gone down, our local wheeling area had been shut down, and they were reworking it and turning it into an ORV park. And when they did, they made it challenging for the cars. There wasn't a lot up here for the older vehicles, so it really had died down, and that drew me back as well. And then after I made a trip down to Sand Hollow and went down and played on that stuff, it was fun again. It was fun again, Yeah. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then you were instrumental in helping Wyatt get to wheeling. Is that correct?
That's been a long game, and I mean we can't 100% take credit for that, but the car has always been sitting there in the garage, and as a young kid, and so after Kane had passed, I want to say Wyatt was probably 5 or 6. I took him up, and he wanted to go up in a walker and wanted me to drive him around up there, and so we did, and we had lunch and visited for a little bit, and then we went down, and then when he was probably 7 or 8, I think he and Trinity came down, and Nate and I got into the RC cars, and so I called Erica and I said, hey, I can kind of make him a replica of his dad's buggy, and that'd be kind of cool. And so we did that, and then he came down here, and they were playing and stuff, and then we drove out that replica, and so of course that's just the catalyst for that, and then going to the RC comps and doing that, so it starts that interest, right? And
right.
then and he primarily just went out in the field and would do donuts most of the time. From what you'd get a lot of shit from Steve and I about it, filling the skid plate with grass, waiting for the thing to burn down, because they're on like I think 5 acres, and they have a field out in front of their house, and you go out there and just do brodies, but at least he was driving it, and then it started getting to the point to where Erica wanted him to be able to reach the pedals, and he hadn't sprouted up like he has now, and so we put a seat slider in it so that he could drive it. And then I want to say it was 2 or 3 years, maybe 3 years ago, and this was prior to me, I think, building my car. He wanted to do the Reader rock crawl and with it, and so I spotted for him, and so we did that, and that was the kind of the opening door to do that type of stuff. And so, and it's like I said, it's been a long game waiting for the kids to come of age, and not just say, hey, you need to get in the car and we're going to go do this, but them
wanting
to ask,
right?
Yeah, them to both ask and want to be a part of it, and then seeing them riding around in the car and enjoying it and stuff like that, and to carry on that legacy because they genuinely want to. I think some people feel forced into that, and of course, and can, and that's certainly not the right route to go. So watching it all unfold, like I said, it's been quite a few years waiting, 15, probably 15 years, waiting for it to get to this time, and then seeing him going out and using the car the way that he is now, and watching him learn. Initially it's drive by remote, he's listening to the spotter and you're telling him where he needs to go and stuff, and now they're making the decisions but asking you where specific things are so that they can get themselves online, and just making sure they're not getting offline. So
right,
yeah, it's been great.
That's excellent, because those that don't know, Kane Covert was a really good friend, Jason and Trevor's, and part of that S&N family, I would call it.
Yeah.
And he passed away, and we're talking about Wyatt Covert, his son, and so that's him getting back into the car, taking the reins over. So,
You know,
well, excellent. And what are the plans for the future?
um, well, at this point, I mean, it's mostly been since I first built it, and it's been 3 years now, and I've converted it more to a crawler and got rid of all the go fast and just trying to make it better and better and better, and still trying to do that, just to do a specific job. But um, I've bought, I've gotten a little bit into doing some repairs on some previous cars, and then I've had a chassis design that I did about 3 years ago that is similar to the car that I'm driving now, but has some of the features of the older Bravos, kind of like a more modern, and it's called a Bravo X, and it has some changes that give a more predictable suspension, and a car that has a little more up travel, has the room for portals if someone would want, or if they don't want, would have 1 3/4 tubes so that if there's any rules that they would have to follow, they could. Um, things like that. Just like I said, a more modern kind of design. And so I've gotten a few Certiflat tables and some parts and pieces, and I'm building a jig that'll be just proprietary to that chassis. And the first one will be done for Jeremy Jones, goes by Doc, races the Ultra 4 Series. And I'll start putting that car together here. I'll build the jig for it and build the car as I'm building the jig. Probably in the next month, in my shop, which is a 12 by 24 garage. I've made everything really modular so I can move stuff around and be able to operate in there. So it's pretty tight. But and then once that's done, I might do 2 or 3 cars, and then after that, be able to get it CNC bent and laser cut.
Okay.
So it's not so hands-on and all the parts and components. And the jig will allow all of them to be the same, more like kind of like what was done with the red dot type of cars, where it's just kind of almost a manufactured, where you use the same interior panels and stuff like that, and it'll be made for very specific components. And we'll see where that goes. Am I going to continue to build cars from that? I'm probably going to develop this, and then I'll step back from that, because it's really hard to enjoy the sport and go out and four-wheel and build cars and have a full-time job. And I'm certainly not going to step away from my career
Right.
and build cars again. I already did that. It ran its course. It was fun. I have no regrets about doing it. But I certainly don't want to go back and do that. But I feel like I had some unfinished business there, some open doors that I need to close, and some improvements that I could have made. And so I'd like to at least get that out of the way and handled, and we'll see how it goes.
That's excellent to hear.
Oh.
Are you going to continue to compete, at least maybe in Goldendale? I mean, we really
Yeah,
enjoyed having you out there, and it was great seeing you
yeah,
drive.
it was fun to get back in the car. Nate and I usually have better luck, I think, with him driving. He's a lot stronger. I've had rear steer for about a year. He really knows how to wad a car up to force traction. Um, and he has an older Bravo, and there are things about those cars that make them very sticky to terrain. They do have their quirks, but it it, uh, it has some features that are a little better than the car that I have, and we learned a few things about my car this weekend that we had no anticipation of, and didn't expect, and that's how we ended up in a couple of the situations that we were in. So, whether it's driver or spotter, I get the same satisfaction from either spot. So it's the same excitement and the same fun and stuff like that. So I'll let him decide next year, like I did this year. It's like, do you want to drive or do you want me to drive? And last year I kind of turned into a country song, blowing my knee out, hurting my back, and then have my truck blow up. So figured we'd give me the year off and have me drive. And like I said, after a couple of quirks that my car had, we probably would have had a considerable better finish with him in the car and me spotting. But he's tired of hearing me grunt and groan outside in the headset, at my old age.
We're not getting any younger.
No, packing rocks around and then being busted up for the next week. But luckily, I can just sit in an office chair during the day. No, I'll certainly, yeah, every time Goldendale comes back and any events up here, I'd probably do for fun. And, but as far as running a circuit or a series, you'd be pretty hard pressed for me to do that. So,
Right. Completely understand.
Yeah.
So anything you want to talk about family-wise or anything like that? How are things going?
Family's good. The kids are grown, 27 and 24. They've gone with us to Hawaii. I mean, we like to do that. I've got a trip coming up here in October. Hopefully COVID doesn't completely shut that back down and ruin that again, because we've pushed it out a couple of times already. But no, just enjoying stuff like that. And then I'll probably make a trip down to Sand Hollow and play next February. Certainly like it down there. And then, wait for the spring and summer up here and play local. I would like to head back east with Garrett and us and do a trip and run some of the South Dakota stuff at some point. That's kind of a bucket list thing too. I've never been back there. I've been to a lot of the other places, but never to South Dakota. So that's something that needs to probably get dealt with at some point. So
Yeah, I think that's a place you should go. I think you'll enjoy that.
Definitely. And there's some sites that I'd like to see along the way. Now there's an appreciation. It's not about just getting there for the wheeling and stuff, but there's things like Devil's Tower and Mount Rushmore and just things that I'd like to see along the way and enjoy as well.
The national parks in that area are phenomenal.
Yeah,
they really are.
And those are really high on the list of things that I'd like to do as well while I'm there. I mean, it's like, you're already back there, why not do that as well?
Absolutely, you should. For years, it was all about getting to the location for us. Yep. And now when it's just Shelly and I, it's so much easier just to say, oh, we're going to take a couple of days and we're going to go do this and we're going to go visit these people and we're going to go hit this old fort, or we hit a lot of the national parks and monuments across the United States, and Shelly does the junior ranger programs, and you just learn a lot about the history and why it is what it is that way. And it's just really enjoyable taking the time and seeing America along the way.
Yes.
Except for, instead of just watching it go by in the window.
But yeah, you don't see a lot from the freeways generally.
No, they avoid all the good stuff.
Yeah. You want to get off the beaten path and see those things. So yeah, those are certainly things that I'll appreciate more, this day and age than I would have when I was younger and just about the race. It was about the build. It was about the getting to the comp, getting back to work, and I'm over that.
Enjoy it while you can.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
Well, I want to say thank you for coming on board and spending some time with us and talking about your life and the progress that you made as a human and getting to to build buggies and compete and helping others do the same thing. And it's been a pleasure. It really has.
Yeah. Thanks, Rich.
And I've always appreciated your friendship, and we never get really some time to hang out, but if you're ever down in South Texas in the off season, when we're not doing comps, come by and see us. We're do a little boat time.
Yeah, there you go. That does have some appeal to me.
It has a lot of appeal to me as well. All right. Well, you have fun at work today, and say hello to everybody, and thank you for coming on board.
Have a good day, Rich.
Okay.
Talk to you later. Bye.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.